Hey, in this video, I'm going to show you techniques on how to mic an electric guitar amp. But don't click away if you don't use real amps, because these principles are really important to understand whether you use a real amp, a modeled amp like a Helix or Fractal unit that utilize Dynacabs or any kind of virtual cab, or even if you just use impulse responses with your rig, because no matter what you use, understanding how to mic an amp can truly make all the difference in your tone. Now, this video is one part of a series where I show you the nuances of dialing in tone for electric guitar, things like choosing the right amp, headroom, pairing stereo amps, gain staging, using wet effects, and more, so be sure to check out those other videos in the series. But in this video, I'm going to show you how 1, mic choice changes tone, how 2, mic placement changes tone, how 3, how you can combine different mics to get a unique tone, and 4, how speaker choice changes tone. And yes, the amp cabinet changes tone too, but check out Jim's detailed video on that right here. Let's get into it. Well, hello, my name is Devin Bumstead, and I'm the founder of The Tone Shepherd, and for the past couple years, I've been making amp captures for a few different platforms like ToneX and Quad Cortex, and the community has been so kind, and the captures have been so well received by those of you literally all over the world. I'm so humbled by that. So I really want to empower you with the tools that you need to craft excellent tone, no matter what resources you choose to use. So although I own more mics than these, I'm going to show you my 4 main microphones that are my go-to mics for recording and for capturing electric guitars. A vintage USA-made Shure 545, an Earthworks SR25 small diaphragm condenser, an Audio-Technica AT4081 active ribbon mic, and finally the famous Royer R121 passive ribbon microphone. I told Sweetwater I was doing this video, and they graciously sent me this beautiful 121 to demo alongside the other mics I already owned, and I sincerely couldn't be more grateful. Sweetwater has been my go-to place for gear for a long time now, going all the way back to my first M-Box. My Sweetwater sales reps over the years have all been so personal and helpful on my gear journey. Sweetwater's customer service is top-notch as well. Whenever I have issues with gear, they're the most helpful and gracious group of people to work with. I actually just had an issue with my new Apollo interface, some software thing, and they got me back up and running within minutes. One of the great things about Sweetwater too, even though I try to avoid debt by all means, I have used their 0% financing on big ticket items like my Apollos, and I've used their easy payments, which is a great way to spread a payment out over a couple months. I actually did that with this Z80 actually. So do check out those options. And lastly, if you're interested in any of the gear you see here or in my videos, or just curious of the gear I use in general, if you head to thetoneshepherd.com/gear, there are links to everything there, and using those links actually does help the channel. So I really appreciate your support, and huge thanks again to Sweetwater for sponsoring this video. So for our audio tests, I'm going to use my Dr. Z Z80 head through my Zilla Studio Pro 2x12 open back cab with a Celestion Alnico Gold to start out with. Captures of this amp are available on my website, by the way, shameless plug, using this Jennings Voyager with Lambertone's Crema Grinder pickups. I'm also recording each mic into my Apollo 8XP Gen 2, running the API Vision channel strip set completely flat with no EQ or filtering. So you'll be hearing the raw mics just into an API preamp. Just a side note to mention that when I'm dialing in an amp capture, I will often use the EQ on the Vision strip, usually to tame some low end and high end, or some low mid mud, but today, for this test, I want to leave the mics wide open so you can really hear the natural frequency response. Also, please listen to this on good speakers or headphones if you can. It's gonna make a difference. And I have made the raw audio files and impulse responses available for each of these demos, so check out the links in the description. As these tests are going, you'll see some info displayed on the side. Position 1 means the mic is placed dead center in the middle of the cone. Position 2 is on the edge of the dust cap. Position 3 is in between the center and the edge. And position 4 is almost all the way to the edge, but not quite. I'd also recommend using chapter markers for these demos if you want to speed through these tests to hear a really quick comparison of these mic changes. So let's jump in. For test 1, we're going to place each mic in the same spot on the speaker, right up on the grill cloth, as close as it can get without touching, and listen for the tonal differences. So as you heard, each mic highlights different frequencies, and some mics sounded pretty harsh in that position. I don't typically use dynamic mics like the 545 or the SM57 in the very center of the cone, but ribbon mics are a different story since they're much warmer to begin with. But let's see what happens when we move the mic around the speaker. For test 2, I'm going to place each mic in the 4 positions I mentioned earlier, all of these still close to the grill cloth. So hopefully you're beginning to notice that each mic has a sweet spot in there where it feels more natural, and it can take some hunting to find those spots, but it's worth the effort to find it. Now, we just listened to the horizontal movement of these mics, their position, but let's hear how the depth or distance of the mic, moving it further away from the speaker, changes the tone. We're going to now test each mic in its sweet spot horizontally, but at different distances from the grill cloth. First, close up, then 2 inches back, and then 4 inches back. With good headphones or speakers, you should have been able to hear the further away the mic is from the speaker, the less low end there is, and the top end comes across a little bit more detailed or airy. This is called proximity effect. The closer you are to the source, the more low end, just like a vocal that's up on the microphone. And obviously, with distance, you could be more subtle or more aggressive. Just changing it by 1 inch could be helpful, or putting it 12 inches or more from the speaker. You start to capture more of the room that the cab is in. But in general, this shows you what's happening when you move a mic away from the speaker. So far, we've only been hearing the mics on axis, which means perpendicular to the speaker, straight on. But what if you angle the mic a little bit, which is called off-axis positioning? What happens then? As you heard, miking off axis, even if the mic is still pointed to the center of the cone, can reduce quite a bit of high end, specifically around 7K. I've also noticed it doesn't do too much to add low end by doing this technique, so this is a great method if you're loving the tone you're getting but just want to reduce some of that harsh top end. Now for my example, I was a bit dramatic, making that angle 45 degrees and a little bit further away, but if you just angled it slightly, it can be really helpful to make an EQ change without needing an actual EQ at all. So next, what happens when we throw two mics on a cab? One of my favorite techniques is combining two different mics, usually two mics that aren't similar, and making one cohesive tone from the two. This is an area that I'm always playing with. I don't have a set in stone formula for this, and every amp I capture I approach with an open mind to mic placement and mic choice, and I spend some good time trying to find the right speaker, mics, and placement that best honors the amps. Now before I run this test, I have to tell you I'm a stickler for making sure that when I'm combining two mics, they're both perfectly in phase. Essentially, you want to line up the mic capsules so that they're the exact same distance from the grill cloth so that the sound wave arrives at the mic capsule at the exact same time. When you do this wrong, you get something called comb filtering, which can be this phasey, thin, lifeless sound. But when you line it up correctly, it enhances the low end and really goes a long way to get a big and full tone, making the two mics sound like one. So how do I do this? Well, I set up the mics where I think they'll be close. I just eyeball it. And then I send a click noise or a popping balloon for the strongest transient through the amp and record the two mics together. Then I'll zoom in on the recording to see if the waveforms are perfectly aligned at the beginning. If one is slightly ahead of the other, I'll physically move the mic forward or backward just a little bit and run the test again until they're perfectly lined up. So I've already done that for all of these combos, so let's hear how they sound. Now, when I listened to those back to back, I was actually shocked at how similar they all sounded. Certainly much more rich than just a single mic alone, but when you combine two of them, the differences are more subtle between those combinations. I don't know. You let me know in the comments what you thought about those combinations. All right, so just when you think you've locked in your preferred mic in your preferred location, now what about trying different speakers? Well, that brings us to test number 4, speaker choice. This has a massive effect on tone, and once I realized this, I almost stopped buying overdrive pedals and started buying speakers instead. It's one of the fastest and cheapest ways to get a different tone. For the sake of time, for this test, we're just going to use the classic Royer 121 mic in position 2, about 1 inch back from the grill cloth, on just a handful of the speakers that I already have loaded into cabs. I have a lot more speakers than this, and not all of these speakers are typically paired with an AC style amp, but to be honest, it really doesn't matter. Just listen for the tonal differences the speakers make. Interesting, right? Each speaker has a unique tonal signature, which keeps the tone hunt alive and well. So I hope you found that helpful and insightful. As I mentioned, there isn't one and only one way I mic up an amp. I have some captures where I've only used a single 545, and I have other captures where I've combined the 545 with the 4081, and some that use the 121 and 545. So if you came here looking for the Tone Shepherd secret formula, there is none. I really don't want to systematize my approach just for the sake of speed. I want to treat each amp like it's my baby, like it's the only amp in my collection. And I want to capture it in a way where I can feel confident using that one amp for the rest of my life. And so that's how I approach it. I want to stay curious during every capture. So the point of this is not to just give you my secrets, it's just to give you a little taste of what these techniques are capable of, and to give you a little head start in how you approach miking a real amp or adjusting the mic speaker controls on a digital unit. If this video was helpful to you in that way, please do the like and subscribe thing and all those things here on YouTube. You can check out my website at thetoneshepard.com, where I offer my amp captures and other presets for Tonex, Quad Cortex, Helix is coming up, and more. And do check out my gear links. If you're already gonna buy some strings or picks anyway, if you just click one of my links to first get you there, that would be so appreciated, and it would help the channel. Lastly, I'm not sure if any of you are into this stuff, but if you are, I'm a worship player. In fact, I'm a worship pastor. And so I'd love to invite you over to my Instagram, where I talk not only about gear, but about deeper worship theology and philosophy. It's a place where I encourage your heart and your craft, and I'd be honored to chat with you there. Huge thanks again to Sweetwater for sponsoring this video, and until I see you in the next one, be blessed.